Should Lord Mandelson ever have been given the job?
Absolutely not. He should not have been given the position in the first place.
The family of Jeffrey Epstein's most prominent accuser, Virginia Giuffre, tells us Lord Mandelson should never have ended up in Washington, D.C. There's no suggestion he ever met her or was offered introductions to women by the wealthy predator Jeffrey Epstein. But there's not much sign of the political pain for the Prime Minister going away after he fired his famous ambassador just days away from President Trump's touchdown here in the UK. This morning, the new Business Secretary, Peter Kyle, joins us live for the government alongside Laura Trott for the Conservatives. Morning, and welcome to our panel this morning too. Broadcasting legends, Piers and Christiane Amanpour. We'd like to start with a kind word.
I said a compliment.
And Rosena Allin-Khan, Labour MP, who's dangled as a possible deputy leader, but not this time round. Welcome
had a few
to
phone
all three
calls,
of you.
but no, not for me.
Okay, well,
Could be a vacancy soon.
Well, let's start with what's making the news today. The Sunday Times splashes on the pressure cranking up on the Prime Minister with revelations of how Lord Mandelson was given the job. The Mail on Sunday reckons the Epstein emails still to come could destroy Prince Andrew. The Sunday Mirror has a different story. They went to Ukraine with the new Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, and they lead on her vow to stand with Kyiv. But the Observer front page features Elon Musk and Tommy Robinson. They both spoke to protesters in London yesterday, Elon Musk by video link. 26 officers were injured while policing the rally organised by the far-right activist Tommy Robinson. It saw as many as 150,000 people march through central London. Let's then get on with business with our panel. Piers, there was more than 100,000 people on the streets yesterday unhappy with a smaller counter-protest. The ambassador to the White House has been sacked. How are things going for this government, do you think?
It's a complete and utter shambles. It's a shambles politically, and it's a shambles with policy in particular. I think most people in this country feel like Labour have lost control, don't really know what they're doing. The country is rudderless, and they're crying out for proper leadership. And the problem is that Sir Keir Starmer's authority, I think, is being diminished week by week by having to sack people that he stood up in the Commons and vehemently defended. 2 weeks running, his deputy leader, then his UK ambassador to the United States. Now, these are big, big hammer blows to a man already struggling because, in my opinion, way too many broken promises, way too many pledges that he can't keep, and a real sense from people that he doesn't have a clear idea of what he actually wants to do to get us out of this mess.
Christiane, you've spent your career, covering governments having troubles normally around the world, but what does the UK look like to you right now?
Well, look, I mean, Piers has laid out the situation here for the Prime Minister. I'm sure our MP will speak about it too, but I'm much more interested in my lane about the foreign policy implications. You saw one of the newspaper correctly focused on Yvette Cooper's trip to Ukraine. I fear very deeply that a lot of this, while super important, takes away from some of the other even more existentially important things, or as important. And that is, Ukraine, the survival, how to stand up to Russia, who's testing NATO right now. And also, how do we allow 150,000 people who've punched officers, broken noses, broken teeth, and concussions, to spew hate speech like that.
And when, of course, there's such distractions, political distractions, the bandwidth for those big foreign policy issues is, of course, diminished. Rosena, what does it feel like on the inside of the Labour Party?
I think at the moment it does feel like it is a very tumultuous time, but we are hopeful. There are a lot of good things that we're doing that people are not aware of. For example, rolling out the 30 free hours of childcare. For example, bringing down our NHS waiting times. But without a doubt, we do not look as united as we should be. We have a deputy leadership contest coming up at the moment, which is an opportunity to elect a deputy leader that is going to hit the ground running. We have huge elections in May. We've got the Welsh elections, the Scottish elections, council elections. And we have to be able to let people know that we are championing what's important to them. And seeing up to 150,000 people on the streets yesterday in London, we have to ask ourselves, yes, of course, there were bad actors at play in there. There are people who are racist to their core. But there were also a lot of people in there who aren't naturally racist or fascist, desperate for some answers. And they want to know what happens to them if they can't get an NHS appointment, if their children can't buy a house near where they live. They're there because there are deep-rooted issues that need addressing, and this government have to show that they're listening.
And at the moment, they're not?
I think there's a long way to go.
OK, right.
Very polite.
Diplomatic, we'll be back with the three of you a bit later on in the programme because, of course, add into all of this cocktail, President Trump will land in the UK in just a few days' time. But the warm-up to the visit was not the eager anticipation of the trumpets and tiaras of the royal receptions or the wheeling and dealing that could see billions of pounds of business being done and brought into the UK. But instead, the government has been lurching its way through what has felt like a real crisis. At the heart of the discomfort, unease about what was Lord Mandelson's well-known friendship with Jeffrey Epstein. For years, he had said it was a matter of regret. It wasn't a secret. And the Prime Minister did ask him some questions about that relationship at the time of his appointment. But when a cache of emails between the two emerged this week, revealing the full nature of their friendship, plenty of people in the Labour Party have suddenly discovered the miraculous benefit of hindsight, lining up to say the appointment was a misjudgment in the first place. On Wednesday, Keir Starmer said Epstein's victims were always at the forefront of his mind. But this morning we hear from the family of the most prominent of them all, Virginia Giuffre, who accused Epstein of abusing her and trafficking her to his friends and to Prince Andrew. After years of campaigning, she died by suicide in April. There is no suggestion that Lord Mandelson ever met Ms Giuffre or that he sought or was ever given introductions to women by Epstein. But her family believes he should never have been given the plum position in Washington in the first place. I spoke to Skye and Amanda Roberts, Giuffre's brother and sister-in-law, late yesterday from Colorado.
I want to first and foremost commend the UK for taking action following that. I think that's a step in the right direction, but to me, it's not nearly enough.
But that initial decision made by the government to put him in place when people knew about their friendship, what do you think of that?
I think, why does it take us to have to pull out the skeletons, for people to be held accountable? Our governments have allowed these people to hold their status and their title, without shame. And so part of me is we should have done something sooner. He should have never been given that title. And there are a lot of people that are actively out in our governments, in politics, in our financial systems, that are actively holding their titles and positions. And we have to put the spotlight on them.
Skye, do you think he should have been given the job in the first place?
So absolutely not. He should not have been given the position in the first place. It speaks to how deep the corruption is in our systems, whether that's linked to the UK or the United States or abroad from there.
We should say that Lord Mandelson has always said that he didn't know anything about the abuse that was going on. He has also said in recent years that he regretted their friendship very much.
I think anybody that's in that book, including President Trump, should be completely and 100% investigated, and if it is found, then should be held to the fullest extent of the law. That's what this is about.
Well, we'll hear more from them later and their views on the ongoing Epstein saga, on the royal family and Prince Andrew, and on Donald Trump. When it comes to Epstein's birthday book, there were entries from 40 people in there. Those people are not accused of wrongdoing in connection with Epstein. Neither Lord Mandelson nor Downing Street wanted to comment on the couple's comments. And as we said, there's no suggestion the peer ever met Giuffre, and he publicly regretted his friendship with Epstein for many years. So it was no secret that they were linked. Peter Kyle, the business secretary, is here on this important day. Welcome to the studio. Was it a mistake for Lord Mandelson to be made Keir Starmer's American ambassador?
Can I just first say, watching that interview and hearing lots of other testimony from victims of Epstein, it is extremely distressing to hear it. The victims must come first in all of these situations, and I'm pleased that you have brought the voice of victims into this for what Epstein did. To your question, at the point at which Peter Mandelson was appointed and the run-up to his appointment, global politics have been turned upside down. The relationship between Britain and America was in a perilous state because of the threat of tariffs, what was happening economically, trying to repurpose and rethink the special relationship. Britain needed somebody with outstanding singular talents, experience which was very hard to come by. And yes, a lot was known about Peter Mandelson's relationship with Epstein. He had apologised for it, and these two things were weighed up. There was an independent appointments inquiry that was done by the Cabinet Office. There was a political process run by Number 10. And on balance, based on what was known publicly, based on what we knew and you knew as journalists, the decision was taken to appoint him. And then I have to say that in that period, we have navigated the most difficult period in US-UK relationships since the Second World War, and we have delivered for people in Britain, time after time after time.
But the question is, was it a mistake to give him the job? You say a balanced decision was made. You looked at the risks, you knew there were risks, you're not denying that. The government was well aware there were risks. Was it a mistake?
I think what has happened is new information. We didn't know the depth of the relationship. We didn't know that Peter Mandelson had advised Jeffrey Epstein post-conviction, and actually he pled guilty at that. Mm-hmm. So there are new circumstances. We will go back and look at the appointment. You know, we'll go back and judge on then what we know now. But we didn't know that at the point in time.
Number 10 sources have told us here at the BBC that Mandelson was economical with the truth. Do you think he misled Downing Street?
Well, it is clear that the emails, and bearing in mind that 10 Downing Street, the Prime Minister, only read the full emails on Wednesday evening.
This is about what happened at the time. Do you believe that Peter Mandelson misled Keir Starmer and his team about the nature or the full extent of their relationship? Because it's also understood that Lord Mandelson believes, hang on, he was truthful, he was frank, he hadn't tried to hide it, and he did tell them the nature of the relationship. So someone here is not being straight about what happened. Do you think Peter Mandelson misled or was economical with Downing Street? Or do you think that Downing Street is now trying to cover its tracks and they did know but made the decision for the reasons that you've already outlined?
Well, all I can do is reiterate what the facts are, that the emails revealed a material difference between what Number 10 was believed at the time of the appointment, and that the vetting process, which is independent and run by the Cabinet Office, was able to conclude based on the evidence then. There's a material difference between the two. There was a lot of information public at the time. Mm-hmm. Peter Mandelson had appeared on Newsnight just this year as ambassador, and he was not questioned about Epstein once.
But this is about Keir Starmer's judgment. This is not about what other actors may or may not have done once he was in the job. We understand that after the initial vetting was carried out by the Cabinet Office, Keir Starmer, through his Chief of Staff, posed 3 questions to Lord Mandelson about his relationship with Epstein. Given everything that was in the public domain, not to speak also of his long history of various business deals, was it really enough to ask him 3 questions about his relationship, his publicly known relationship with one of the most notorious paedophiles?
There had been an independent vetting process by the Cabinet Office that had gone into all the details that could have been got hold of at the time.
Really? It's suggestions it was only 2 pages this morning. Is that wrong?
Well, maybe that. I have no idea how long I haven't read it, but there was a thorough vetting process, which is the same for every public appointment where somebody from outside a government is brought into government.
Forgive me, Secretary of State. If you haven't read it, you can't tell us in all conscience that it was a thorough vetting process that turned up everything.
Is that all of the details from the independent vetting process was done in the same way for any other person that does a public appointment that comes in from the outside because he was external of government being brought in. All of those checks and balances were done. Everything that was known publicly, and I assume that they did as much vetting that they could have done on all information, was gathered, it was assessed, and then it was presented to the Prime Minister. There was also, of course, the political process that unfolded. So, by the time it got to the Prime Minister, he was presented with an awful lot of information in order to have the conversation that he did there.
Just before we move on, and we must move on, I just wonder, you are a senior member of this government. You know all of the people involved in this on the Labour side. Do you yourself believe it was now a mistake?
What I believe, and I've always felt, is you start with the victims and you end with the victims. When I see the family talking, I feel pain as a result of it.
And they say clearly it was a mistake.
And they say it was a mistake. And retrospectively, if we had known the information we know now, it is highly unlikely that he would have been appointed, because what we know now is materially different than what we understood at the time. And also, he has done numerous TV interviews. He's been on your programme here. He's been on Newsnight, and he was not questioned about Epstein and his relationship with Epstein.
This is about the Prime Minister's decision-making when the risks were flagged and he decided that on balance it was worth going ahead. But let's move on. On Wednesday, the Prime Minister backed Peter Mandelson very strongly, even though the government had already been made aware that there were more damaging allegations on the way. Why did he do that?
Because the emails were presented to the Foreign Office in extract, not in context. That was put to Peter Mandelson and asked for a response. That response never came, and we never saw the full cache of emails at that point. That only became available on Wednesday evening. And on Wednesday evening, the Prime Minister went through it, he did an assessment, and by Thursday morning, Peter Mandelson was asked to withdraw.
But if he knew there were damaging allegations, you had extracts of the emails had been passed to the government, was the Prime Minister wise to back him in the way that he did?
Because the Prime Minister wanted to have all of the facts. He had asked for more information and a response from Peter Mandelson. Bear in mind, we're talking about a 24-hour period here. So when Keir Starmer came into office, he raised the bar for standards in public life. He gave more independence to the Commissioner for Standards in Public Life. And he sped up the process. No longer do we have the two-month spectacle that we saw with Priti Patel and Boris Johnson, But so often ministers, with respect, so often ministers start talking about the process here. And I think for many of our viewers, the issue is not the process, it's the problems that keep emerging. And Peter Mandelson is not the first politician to leave this government. We can actually, 7 days ago we were talking about Angela Rayner. She was the 5th politician to leave government. Here are some of the others who went. Tulip Siddiq, Louise Haigh had to go, Rosena Ali. The Prime Minister promised the country that you were going to be different, that he would end what we'd seen as chaotic politics under the Conservatives. He's broken that promise, hasn't he? What he has done is he has raised the standards of public life. He has given more independence to the Commissioner who enforces...
This is about what your party's politicians have been up to. That is what the public and some of your own MPs look at and think, hang on a minute, they promised they were going to be different, and they're not.
Laura, I feel the pain of when we're let down. I feel it existentially because I care so much about this Labour government being able to deliver. I am proud that we've raised the standards of public life. I'm proud that Keir, when he's confronted with it, makes a decision within hours or a day. He doesn't drag it on for weeks and months. So when people fall foul of it, for whatever reason, and there are lots of reasons why people don't live up to the standards of public life, in a government that has 120, 130 ministers and people who are serving in the government in public life as part of the Labour Party, he acts decisively. There will always be people who don't meet the standards that we have set. Keir acts decisively. He has raised the standards. That's something I'm proud of. But of course, when people let us down, I mean, people like me and others, who, of course we feel it.
But the
deeply.
questions about the Prime Minister's judgment are now coming in a way that we haven't seen before. And one of your MPs publicly suggested he's not up to the job. And many of our viewers are also absolutely exasperated. People have got in touch with us this week, and I want to share some of their comments. I fear he's a very poor judge of character and he should resign, the sooner the better. I've been a loyal Labour voter, says Sonia, all my life, but are we destined to be embroiled in sleaze and dishonesty? Your government promised renewal, but you've delivered confusion. Public trust is eroding. And just the last one, is it any surprise there may be voter apathy in the UK? We can tell this morning that you too are exasperated by this. But you're breaking the promise that Keir Starmer made to the country again and again, that chaos would stop, that you would be better.
I'm exasperated when people don't meet standards that Keir Starmer has set. This government is delivering with Keir's leadership. If you look at the US relationship, we are the first country to get a deal. We've got the best deal of any other country. In fact, we're the only one to get a deal across the line. That is delivering and protecting jobs. When it comes to public...
Just as you raise
Laura,
it.
hang on a sec. You asked a very wide and deep existential question there. Last week, we hit 4 million new appointments in the NHS. This coming week, we are going to announce a series of new investments and opportunities for Britain to succeed. And if you take just one of them, an extra £1.5 billion or £1.2 billion of investment from American banks into Britain, 1,000 jobs in Belfast, hundreds of jobs in Edinburgh and in Manchester. We're not just, because we are a Labour government, we're not just putting that money into London, we are making sure the benefits of these economic partnerships are spread right around the country. So this is a government that is delivering. We are turning a corner. We are ending the mess that we inherited when it comes to immigration and a broken economy and public services that were on their knees. We accept that we need to do better. We accept that we need every Briton to feel the benefits of our changes in their pockets. We know that businesses need new opportunities to create wealth and jobs and succeed in Britain, and we are acting.
And on that point, you're new in the job as Business Secretary. One of the promises of the trade pact with the US was that steel tariffs, taxes on exports for UK companies would go. 4 months later, they haven't disappeared. When's that going to happen?
So right across the board, we have delivered a comprehensive deal that benefits jobs and protects jobs. There are some aspects of the deal that we are still negotiating the implementation of.
So when's it going to happen? That's what the industry wants to know.
The steel industry is doing better and better protected than any other around the world, and we are making sure that we can make sure those benefits are enshrined in a sustainable, long-term way.
But when? Would that happen this week, or this part of the state visit?
I was there on Monday. I was appointed on Friday evening. I was in the department on Saturday. I was in Washington on Sunday. I was in the West Wing of the White House on Monday talking about these issues. I am straight out of the gate. I am there negotiating, and we will get a deal across the line for a whole bunch of new things and new opportunities very soon that you're going to hear more about this week. And when it comes to steel, we will make sure that we have an announcement as soon as possible. OK.
We must talk about the very significant protests yesterday in London. And one of President Trump's former allies, Elon Musk, told protesters in London that violence is coming. He said people have to fight back or die. Is the world's richest man trying to incite violence in this country?
I thought that they were slightly incomprehensible comments that were totally inappropriate. But what we saw yesterday was over 100,000 people who were expressing freedom of association, freedom of speech, and proving that both of those things are alive and well in this country. A small minority of people who are protesting committed acts of violence against our police, for which they should and they will be held accountable.
But does it worry you that in the UK in 2025, that number of people, and of course, there's no suggestion that everybody there was expressing extremist views or was involved in violence, but does it worry you as a senior figure in this country that that number of people would want to turn out to hear the far-right activist Tommy Robinson speak and would then hear that sort of language from someone like Elon Musk, who I think is now the second richest man in the world rather than the first, but a huge figure nonetheless? Does that worry you?
What worries me most is the divisions in our society and other societies and other democratic societies. It's not even the left and the right at the moment. There are communities that are being driven further apart. And there are figures, such as Tommy Robinson, that is able to touch into a sense of disquiet and grievance in the in our society. A lot of it goes back to its roots in the financial crisis and the impact that had on communities around the country. And we haven't been able to bring our communities back together again since. So I think these are moments that are klaxon calls to us in public life to redouble our efforts to address the big concerns that people right across our country have, and immigration is a big concern. It's a concern that I and the Prime Minister share very deeply, and we are acting on, and other concerns as well. But we have to do it in a way that can start to bring communities back together again. That is something that we have not solved. It is something we are striving for. It is something that all of us in public life must double down on.
OK, Peter Carroll, Secretary of State, thanks very much indeed for coming in. And come back soon and we'll talk more about the details in your new inbox, but you'll understand why today we focused on other issues. Thanks very much. And a little later, we'll hear more from Sky and Amanda on President Trump, Prince Andrew and Epstein's survivors fight for justice. And as ever, as we've just heard, some of your views on what's been going on, do keep getting in touch. We love hearing from you. You can email us, kuenssberg@bbc.co.uk, or if you're social media inclined, you can use the hashtag BBC Laura K. And the WhatsApp number, 08000 282 161, is there for you too. Rosena, you started the programme trying to be diplomatic, saying that the government sort of had to put its socks up, but you did have good things to say. But this issue of the Prime Minister's judgment is going to hang around, is it not?
Firstly, just to say about the video, I think we really have to remember what we're talking about here. We're talking about children who were abused, who were trafficked. At the heart of that, there are families. And absolutely, I believe, to my core, that Peter Mandelson should never have been appointed to the position. His links with Jeffrey Epstein were known, and regardless of how tenuous they may have seemed at the time, who knew what and when, he should not have been appointed to the role.
And was that expressed by Labour MPs like you or ministers at the time? One source told me this week that the Cabinet wasn't consulted at all on that decision. Was there discussion inside the Labour Party at the time? Were there people putting their hands up and saying, hang on a minute, stop this? Because the process went on for months. There was speculation for ages over who was going to get the job.
Well, I'm not in the Cabinet. I'm on the backbenches, and MPs like myself are not part of a process like that. We don't really know what's going on. We're not consulted in any way. So I don't know the details of who knew what and when. I certainly, if I had been asked, I would have expressed my concern, because I don't believe that there was only one good option for us to have an ambassador to America.
Christiane, we're going to talk about America a bit later in the programme, so we'll get into all of the consequences and the international situation with President Trump's visit coming. But do you think that Starmer's judgment has been put into question by the decision to appoint him?
Can I say, clearly yes, obviously. I mean, it's, clearly that shouldn't have happened. I just want to quote something that I heard on the BBC this morning. Humanity has really let itself down this week. I mean, across the board. The assassination of Charlie Kirk, the horrendous reaction afterwards, on the one hand, some people celebrating, on the other hand, from the very top, the President of the United States and very powerful people setting a narrative that it's the radical left. We don't even know much about this guy, except that he was actually born of Republican parents. Come on. The narrative has been set. Then what do you see? These kinds of massive, divisive marches and rallies in the streets. It comes down to leadership. I had the opportunity to have Martin Luther King III, the son of Dr. King, who was assassinated in 1968, on my show. And he said to me, and he's talking about when this happened to Dad, he said, across the United States, cities and towns were burning, except for one, Indianapolis, because a leader, Robert F. Kennedy, who was running for president, happened to be in Indianapolis and went out, and it's famous, the video is there, waded into the crowds of angry black voters and others who were distraught, and went and exerted leadership and told them they can't do revenge, they must, we hear your pain, but, we have to try to guide the debate. And George W. Bush, one of the things he said was, we cannot treat our political opponents as mortal enemies. Enough already. And we have to have America lead itself back to civility. And that applies to all of our debates.
But when it comes, Piers, to this country, and we'll talk more about President Trump later in the show, that question of leadership that you raised at the top, when you hear Peter Kyle then say, actually, we haven't yet brought people together, we haven't been able to unite the country, we haven't been able to do things in the way that we'd hoped, what do you assess the chances of them being able to pull this round, to be able to get out of the doldrums, for Labour actually to look like they've got a grip?
Increasingly small. And I've got to say, it takes a brass neck to come on here as the representative of the government and start boasting about raising standards in public life, when in the last 2 weeks you've had your deputy leader have to be forced out over not paying taxes, having led the charge herself against Tory MPs relentlessly for not paying taxes, and then have the Peter Mandelson scandal, which comes down to this for me. There are lots of people that consorted with Epstein in various ways before his conviction, who then had nothing to do with him after his conviction for being a paedophile. Donald Trump is one of them. He had nothing more to do with him. The key thing for me with Mandelson was the revelation that he had carried on seeing him regularly after the conviction for being a paedophile. You can have plausible deniability of what you may or may not have known about the guy before he actually goes to prison for being a paedophile. You don't have any afterwards. So I'm afraid, I think the important question for Keir Starmer, when they did this supposed great vetting of Peter Mandelson, did they ask the key question? Did they ask him, did you carry on seeing Jeffrey Epstein after his conviction for being a paedophile? Because that would surely be disqualifying for somebody who's going to be an ambassador to the United States for this country.
Well, we know, we've been reporting here at the BBC in the last 24 hours that he was asked why he continued contact after the conviction.
Was he asked in the vetting? Was he asked then that key question? And the second point about Keir Starmer not knowing about the Bloomberg email revelations, really? Because it was sent to the Foreign Office on the Tuesday. And they allowed the Prime Minister to stand up in Prime Minister's questions, apparently not knowing that these emails were going to reveal all this material, which was obviously so damning. I'm afraid someone's not telling the truth. And Keir Starmer needs to come out. He's not said anything since Peter Mandelson left. He needs to come out and he needs to answer two things for me. One, did Peter Mandelson ever tell you he carried on seeing Epstein, right, after the conviction? And secondly, are you really expecting us to believe that your Foreign Office was sent all these emails by Bloomberg on the Tuesday and you then stood up in PMQs and emphatically stood by Peter Mandelson because you didn't know the contents of any of them? I'm just not buying it.
The word Peter Kyle used was that excerpts of the emails had been sent to the Foreign Office. But yes, that's clearly a question many people would want to ask Keir Starmer, and of course we would love to ask him that question here on the programme too. Rosena, do you, however, have any sympathy for Lord Mandelson? Because it's understood he thinks, well, hang on a minute, I was truthful, I was frank, this was out in the public domain, people knew that he'd been friends with Epstein.
Was he truthful?
But do you think there is any element, there's obviously a lot of bad blood swirling around now inside the Labour Party over what happened here, but is there any way in which you think that Lord Mandelson actually himself is somebody who people might feel a bit sympathetic for? Because he told them previously about his relationship. It wasn't a secret, and it was Keir Starmer who went ahead.
I don't feel any sympathy, I'm sorry, because ultimately we can have friends and our friends can do things that we find morally reprehensible. He had a friend who did things that were morally reprehensible. He was convicted for doing things that were, quite frankly, disgusting. He chose to stay friends with him. That was known. He was appointed. But I think, just going back to talking about the marches for a moment, if I may, 30 years ago, and actually this kept me awake last night thinking about it, 30 years ago, I was attacked in the park with my brother and my dad. I'm of mixed Polish-Pakistani heritage. We had dogs set on us, jackets ripped up, had to go to the A&E, where I now work, actually. And I feel, looking at the images from yesterday, and my phone blowing up with friends saying, I am scared, what have we become? 30 years later, we find ourselves in a position where there is hate speech, where people who are black, brown, gay, all sorts of difference that should be celebrated are feeling frightened. And what we need now is leadership and unity.
And is Keir Starmer the man who is up to the task of providing that leadership?
I believe he's had a tricky year in office. I think the polls are going to show in May whether or not people believe that he is up to the job. But right now, I believe he got a huge mandate from Labour members. He got a mandate from the country, and we do have to let him see this out and be judged in May. I think he can continue, but he has a lot of proving to the public to show that he is up to the job.
So you're giving the Prime Minister a deadline, sort this out by May?
I'm not personally imposing a deadline. I'm saying the country has shown that they're unhappy. We have a surge in the Green and Lib Dem support because of our stance on Gaza, because of the absolute chaos around the welfare bill. There is a vacuum there to be filled, and it is up to the Labour Party and our Prime Minister, who I have faith in, to deliver and fill that vacuum and prove to the public in May that they can put their faith in him.
OK, all three of you, we must move on, but we will have plenty of time to discuss more later with you in the show. Well, the Epstein scandal is so much wider than British politics. It claimed the reputation of a member of the royal family. It posed questions for Donald Trump. And of course, most importantly, it ruined the lives of so many young women. But in the last couple of weeks, a slew of some of the documents in this case have been published, including the birthday book full of tributes to Epstein from powerful friends. Yet what has it been like for the survivors of his abuse to walk through another storm? Earlier, we heard a little from the family of his most prominent accuser, Virginia Giuffre. They told us Lord Mandelson should never have been given his job in Washington. She died in April.
you know, she did so many amazing things in her lifetime, and she was able to take down some of the most rich and powerful men out there. And so we're still grieving through this process, but we're also so proud of what she was able to do, and we feel that sense of responsibility to make sure that her voice is still here with us, and it's with all of the survivors.
And her campaigning over the years helped reveal the network of Epstein's contacts. And we saw when his birthday book was published this week, the extent of those contacts with all those wealthy and powerful people. What went through your mind, Amanda, when you saw that book?
Oh, it was very hard to read because it is so very close to us. But it was so obvious, like it was so gross, you know, some of the content. And it was like this open secret that each one of them had with one another. So for me, it felt like, also, as gross as it was to see that, there's also a sense of vindication, because it points to the fact that there are more people who are implicated in this.
I think anybody that's in that book, including President Trump, should be completely and 100% investigated. And if it is found, then should be held to the fullest extent of the law. That's what this is about.
Do you personally find President Trump's explanations of his knowledge of what was happening, do you find them credible?
I think there's more questions to be asked. There is years and decades of proof that they had a very, very close relationship. And I think an actual investigation is warranted. Virginia met Ghislaine Maxwell at Mar-a-Lago while she was working there. And from his own comments, he was aware that she had been stolen from his own comments.
Skye, what was it like for you to hear the president say that? As Amanda's just said, President Trump did say that Virginia was stolen from Mar-a-Lago by Epstein.
We were very shocked by it. The fact that he would speak my name in his mouth, and that he knew. And she's not stolen. I mean, I've said this before, but these survivors and my sister was not an object. You know, she was preyed upon by Ghislaine Maxwell into a sex trafficking ring at his property and thrust into a world that completely shattered our family.
President Trump will be in the United Kingdom this week, actually. He's here for a state visit. He'll be hosted by the royal family. What would your message, Skye, be to him at this moment?
I think President Donald Trump, if he's not implicated in this, then he needs to do the right thing. And the right thing right now is to release the documents, give the accountability to these survivors, and give accountability to my sister. She didn't lose her life in vain, right? She had a lot of other things going on in her life that we won't get into. But I can tell you, she was proud of what she was able to do. She was not afraid to name names. And these survivors are not afraid to name names, but that's not their responsibility to do that. That's your responsibility to do that.
This is your first broadcast interview in the UK. We're very grateful to you for giving us your time today. But obviously your sister's work and your sister speaking out had a huge impact in this country, on the royal family, and of course on Prince Andrew specifically. He's never accepted wrongdoing, but he did reach an out-of-court financial settlement with your sister after she alleged she'd been trafficked by Ghislaine Maxwell to him. He has been stripped of his royal duties. He's been disgraced, but he is still eighth in line to the throne. He still lives in a royal property. Do you feel that there's been enough acknowledgement of what happened to your sister from the royal family? And has any member of the royal household ever reached out to you as a family in any way?
No, we've never gotten an outreach from the royal family. I think there's more that's going to come to light. And I think that every single person who knows they've harmed her, they have to live with that. And the truth has a way of surfacing, and we have to believe that justice is going to happen. And so I think we're right on the precipice of seeing all of those skeletons start to come to surface. And you know what you've done, and that is for you to live with.
Sky?
I mean, no, they've never reached out to our family or tried to engage in any way, shape, or form. But the fact that he's still out there, that he's still living in a palace, essentially, or a castle, or whatever you want to call it, is not enough. I mean, I think we have to stop allowing, it doesn't matter if it's a royal family member or a president or a prince or a large banking institution or a lawyer. Every single person deserves to be held to the fullest extent of the law. And I don't feel personally like they've done that. I don't feel like Prince Andrew has gotten enough from this, right? I mean, of course, he's been stripped of, all of these different things and publicly shamed in certain ways, but that's not enough. It's time we put every single person, whether you're a royal, Prince Andrew, you need to be fully investigated. And if it is found that you had any participation, you need to be put behind bars for the rest of your life.
Recently, speaking from prison, Ghislaine Maxwell said that the photograph, that infamous photograph of your sister and Prince Andrew, was a fake. What did you think when you heard that, Sky?
That photo is not fake. Why are we listening to a known perjurer? We're giving this person a platform to essentially come out and try to rewrite history. That is not what we should be doing. We should be listening to the survivors. And my sister is a known truth teller. This Ghislaine Maxwell is she's convicted of sex trafficking minors. Convicted. Okay?
And your sister's story, more of it will soon emerge in a book that you are helping to put into the public domain even after her death. What are you trying to achieve by that? And what was she trying to achieve by telling her story in that way?
I think the purpose of this book, when you get to read it, it's a very intimate account of her life. She was vulnerable and she was young and she was a child. And so I really think it sheds light on that. It really sheds light on the powerful people that she was trafficked to and those experiences.
Perhaps let's end with something positive, but she was also a mother, a sister, a friend to people, and an incredible campaigner. What's your fondest memory of your sister?
We were very close growing up. She was always like a protector to me. She just cared so deeply, and I can't think of just one single memory because of who she was. Every day she would light your room up. I mean, every day we miss her so much, but we will continue her fight, and we will not stop until we get justice and accountability for her and for all the survivors out there.
And everyone listening or watching can hear how proud you are to have been her brother, and we're very grateful to you for giving us your time today. Sky and Amanda, thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you.
The family of Virginia Giuffre, and important to say, as ever, if you or anyone you know have been a victim of any kind of sexual abuse or violence, there is a lot of help out there. Details are there on your screen, and you can find that on the BBC website. Now, we approached Prince Andrew for a response to that interview, but we did not get a response. The White House, though, told us it was fake news. They said Donald Trump kicked Epstein out of his club for being a creep. Democrats in the media knew about him and his victims for years and did nothing to help, while President Trump was calling for transparency and is now delivering on it with thousands of pages of documents. Well, Here, our politics has also been dominated this week by the fallout of the Epstein scandal. The Conservative leader, Kemi Badenoch, was on fighting form at Prime Minister's questions this week, pushing the Prime Minister hard on his appointment of Peter Mandelson to the top job in British diplomacy. She's now accused Keir Starmer, though, of lying to the country about what he knew about Peter Mandelson's correspondence with Jeffrey Epstein. Laura Trott's the Shadow Education Secretary, and she's with us in the studio. Thanks for coming in, Laura. It's a big news day. What does Kemi Badenoch believe Keir Starmer lied about? Because it's a big accusation to make.
It is, but there are really grave questions about the Prime Minister's judgment this week. This is the man who stood on the steps of Downing Street and said he was going to restore political integrity. And look where we are. In the space of 2 weeks, we've had 2 senior resignations. We had the outrageous situation this week where the Prime Minister and the Labour Party were defending appointing the best pal of a convicted paedophile to be ambassador to the US. And Keir Starmer is saying that when he stood up on Wednesday, he didn't know about the ongoing relationship. As you've already discussed on the panel, there were allegations that were out on Tuesday that were put to the Foreign Office. Peter Mandelson himself said on Tuesday that there was more to come. On what planet did the Prime Minister not ask what more there is and seek assurances? And yet, I don't buy it, and Kemi's not either.
And yet it has been widely reported here at the BBC and by many other outlets that in Downing Street, Keir Starmer did not see the full extent of the emails until Wednesday night. Now, do you know for a fact that that is not true? Because it's very different to say, as the opposition party, we've got questions about what Keir Starmer said. It's very different to say that than actually just say, no, he's lying.
We know that Bloomberg put these allegations to the Foreign Office on Tuesday. I've been in Number 10. There is no way that is not then reported into Number 10.
But do you know that for a fact?
Well, this is why we need transparency, and this is what we're going to be pushing for next week, Laura. And if you're a Labour MP watching this now, you should be pushing for it too, because we will use every mechanism that is available to us to force the truth to come out.
What do you
mean?
We
need these documents. We need to understand what advice went to the Prime Minister and when. Who made these decisions? How have we ended up in a situation where the advice for the Prime Minister is to appoint the best pal of a convicted paedophile to be US ambassador? It is unacceptable. The British public will not have this, and the Conservative Party will make sure that we get answers.
But as you've just said, you are pushing for answers. You do not yet know the full story, and yet Kemi Badenoch has already concluded, it appears, that the Prime Minister is lying. Is that the actions of a responsible leader to make an accusation that the leader of this country is not telling the truth to the public when you can't be sure of those facts?
Come on, Laura. Come on, Laura. Like, if you are told on Tuesday that there is a cache of emails, you are given the right of reply by Bloomberg. Peter Mandelson himself said that there is more to come. How are you not asking questions? I mean, the Prime Minister's authority is just completely shot as a result of
But that's a different point. I mean, do you agree that it's very important for all politicians to use language carefully?
I do. I absolutely do. And that is why it's really very clear for integrity and faith in politics that we understand exactly what has happened and when. So what is the advice that went to the Prime Minister? Did somebody overrule vetting advice? What did Peter Mandelson relationship, what did he disclose about that as he was going through? It was a matter of public record that Peter Mandelson stayed at Jeffrey Epstein's houses after he was convicted. That was a question that was put to the Prime Minister a year ago by journalists. How can he possibly claim that he did not know about the extent of the relationship? And how can he claim that that is new information?
Well, it is.
I'm not buying it, and Kemi's not either.
It is disputed, in fact, that Peter Mandelson stayed at Jeffrey Epstein's house in Manhattan while he was in prison. But there, as we've been discussing this morning, the links between the two of them were very well known. But I just wonder then, what is your next move as the opposition party? You say you will do everything you can to get hold of the documents. Should you, how will you go about that? Will there be a question in Parliament? Would you even ask the independent advisor on standards in public life to look at the Prime Minister himself? How are you going to carry on?
We will use all avenues available to us, and there's conversations ongoing at the Speaker, which obviously I can't go into, but we will force this information into light. We will do the job as the opposition right now to expose what is going on at the heart of government, because we have a Prime Minister right now at a time of deep difficulties for our country, where we have a welfare bill which is out of control, which Labour and Reform are doing nothing about, where we are at the foothills of an economic crisis. The Prime Minister is distracted. There is a deputy leadership election going on for 6 weeks where the Education Secretary has exposed that her policies are at the behest of unions and not in the interests of children. And we, the Conservatives, will pull the focus to expose what is going on and to try to get the Prime Minister to focus on what is right for the country, not what is right for him and his leadership.
I just wonder, though, again, because this is an important point. You've said it is important for politicians to be careful with their language. We saw 150,000 people, potentially as many as that, on the streets yesterday, attracted by Tommy Robinson organising a protest. I'm not, again, suggesting all of them have extreme views in any way, shape or form, but it was a very significant expression of discontent, creating potentially a really febrile atmosphere. And is it right, again, I ask you in that context, for the leader of your party to be accusing the Prime Minister of lying before you have those full facts? You've just explained you're going to get the facts, or you're going to try, but you don't have the full facts yet.
Look, I think those are two separate issues. What we've seen in the streets of London are some horrendous images and some horrendous violence against police officers. And I know that a lot of people are very scared by what is going on at the moment.
And aren't you ramping up rhetoric?
No, we are talking about two different issues here. In order to have faith, restore faith in politics, we need to understand what has happened in the particular situation with Peter Mandelson. Right. We have had a lot of claims, but what we know is that the self-proclaimed best pal of a convicted paedophile was appointed to US ambassador. That is not acceptable. There must be accountability for these decisions. We must understand what happened, and the Conservatives will push for that.
OK, Laura Trott, Shadow Education Secretary. Come back another time and we'll talk about schools and all those important things in your brief, but you'll understand why we spent time on those other issues today. Thanks very much indeed for coming in. Well, we will close the programme with seeing with what our panel have to say about all of that. It's very clear, listening to Laura Trott, that the Conservatives have every intention on keeping this story going, on trying to create more political discomfort for the Prime Minister. Piers, it's not over, is it?
Well, two things. We were just saying, very lucky for Keir Starmer, there's no PMQs coming up this week. But secondly, very bad news for Keir Starmer that President Trump is coming into town, who has been doing everything he possibly can to distance himself from the Epstein scandal. And now the one story everyone's talking about in the UK, just as he gets here, is the Epstein scandal. And
you know him, you have interviewed him. Is that going to make him cross?
Well, imagine a situation where there's a press conference with the two of them, and rather than talking about the great special relationship and about the royal family and how much he's enjoying being here, there's a bombardment of questions about the Epstein files, which they may well be. I mean, interestingly, I interviewed David Boies last week, who was Virginia Giuffre's lawyer. He's probably the foremost, most respected criminal lawyer in modern American history. He's seen everything on the Epstein scandal. He says there's nothing incriminating about Donald Trump. He said that to me last week. But he said there are 10 to 20 other people named, men, who have never been properly investigated. And when you see that incredibly painful interview with Virginia Giuffre's family, you just think, how is it that the only person that's ever been made properly accountable for this scandal is a woman, Ghislaine Maxwell? What has happened to all these other men who were clearly up to their neck in it?
But do you think what's happened this last 7 days, Christiane, actually has implications for the relationship between the UK and the US?
I don't know about lasting relationship. That's already in such a dire moment right now. Even though the UK has made off better than the rest of the world, all Trump's allies have been distanced. Who knows what's going to happen after this week? And they're very important things for the UK to try to get. But, I mean, we're on the precipice of a major, a major escalation by Vladimir Putin into a NATO country. Remember the mantra, not 1 inch. If Putin moves 1 inch, air, land or sea, into a NATO country, we will respond. Now they're having to set up a drone wall and all the rest of it. Putin only responds to strength. Trump is standing around like an observer. He's kind of shrugging. Oh, it's not my,
And there was the drone attack in Poland this week.
Well, that's what I'm talking about, the drone attack in Poland. And then you've got the attack by Israel on an American ally and on the peace process, by the way. So he's having to mop all that stuff up. But Trump is not using the unique leverage that the US has with either, putting sanctions which are ready to go, and the US and the UK, rather the UK and Europe are want to do that. So I think that's going to be a big issue, and probably is going to be overwhelmed by this stuff too.
And Rosena, how uncomfortable would this visit though be for the Labour Party? I mean, not just because of the Epstein awkwardness of the timing and everything that's happened with Peter Mandelson, but having a state visit, like the last time round when President Trump came here, he spent time with the royal family. There we can see him and his wife meeting the Queen on the last state visit. Those international issues that Christiane has alighted on are so critical and at a very critical moment. How difficult do you think this is going to be for the government this week?
It's really important that our Prime Minister has a relationship with the most powerful person in the Western world when it comes to our security and our economy, particularly looking at Ukraine and the threats that we face. I think it is a tricky week for the Trump visit. Also, in terms of his values, it's also very tricky because a lot of the British public don't want him to conduct a state visit. We don't have any say in who the President of the US is. But do I understand why our Prime Minister has to have an important relationship with him? Of course. Does it make me personally feel deeply uncomfortable? Yes, it does. But I think at this moment in time where geopolitically we face so many threats and nationally we're seeing what we've seen play out this weekend, it's really important that people get their heads straight and sit down this week and talk about the issues that matter for our country.
OK, well, all three of you, thank you very much for helping us collectively get our heads straight this morning. It has been quite a head-bending few days, but it's been great to have the three of you with us here.
Good to see also free speech be centre stage, given the assassination of Charlie Kirk in America and the arrest of a comedian in this country for posts on social media. We've got to get our heads around what free speech actually means around the world. In relation to what Christiane said about the killer of Charlie Kirk, the governor of Utah has come out and said that he was radicalised by a leftist ideology. That was yesterday. If that turns out to be the case, that is a massive problem. That people on the woke left, rather like the problem on the far right, that there is a problem with people who do not want to countenance the views of other people who disagree with them. And they think that violence is the only answer. And this has got to stop.
On every level, leadership is what we're crying out for, because if we don't get responsible leadership, the most violent type will take and fill the vacuum.
People desperate for hope.
All three of you, thank you so much. Again, it's been great to have you with us. And we've had a really interesting discussion. Thank you to my trio at the desk, and thank you to all our guests today. Most of all, as ever, thank you to you for spending your Sunday morning with us. You might remember a while ago we had a treat from the sensational young musician, Sheiko Kane-Mason. He popped into the studio to play for us. Now, the whole family have a new album, and they've kindly played one of the pieces for us, Allin-Khan, a tribute to their Welsh grandparents. And we thought that on a morning like this, it certainly felt like we could do with some light relief. So enjoy this, and I will look forward to seeing you next week. Same time, same place. Here they are.